Hey there, how are you doing today? I got this anguished text from one of my clients in she's in the Sugar Freedom program. And I knew it was anguished or I knew there was a lot of angst because she had all these like crying emojis and upside down frown faces. And it just, I knew it, right? I knew what was going on. And all she said was, how many times am I going to have to start over before I get it right? And what I had to share with her was because of what was going on in the world right then, I was starting over something myself too. So I wanted to just talk about this just a little bit today. Probably the reason people come to me more than any other reason is because they do feel like they're always starting over, right? Like they get going on an exercise program and they get going on an eating program, or they stop sugar, or they're becoming consistent with their movement, or whatever it is. And then something happens, right? Life happens, something happens, comes to a screeching halt. And then what happens is that it may be a week, but usually it could be a month, it could be 6 months, it could be a year, it could be many, many years before they get the chance to start doing what they were doing again. And I get it, because like here's my story. You want to hear my story? I'm recording this right after there was a huge ice storm that came through practically the entire country. It happened to really affect where I live. I live in the South. We're not used to ice storms. I mean, we might deal with hurricanes, but we have no idea of how to deal with an ice storm. And so no power, no water, no cell coverage, no nada, right? For longer than I would have anticipated. And this is interesting because, like, for me, all of this happened at about midnight on the 15th of February. And I think it was actually about 1 in the morning when we lost power. Well, that morning, the 15th, when I was going to wake up, I had actually laid out a 10-week program, like this serious, like, it's time for me to step up my fitness. And here's my 10-week program. And I mean, it was laid out in black and white. But there's a but there. The reality was that I woke up to a world with no power. It was friggin' freezing. Like, I mean, like a Southerner that I am, I wasn't used to, I think we were in the single digits, which is kind of unheard of in Texas. And, no water, just like, boom, it was a whole new world. And so I thought about it, and I thought, of course, I'm not going to sweat it. Because if nothing else, I tell people all the time, and I usually don't even like to hear this, is that sometimes things throw us off, right? And so we have to reset. We have to figure out what's going to work. And then we just go forward from there. For me, I looked at what was going on. I looked at basically the weather. I looked at the terribleness that was happening to people. And in my 10-week program, suddenly became an 11-week program, because I knew it wasn't even going to start until the following week. There was nothing I was going to do about it. Just stop, relax, and deal with what I could deal with. And so that's what I told my client, because she was in the middle of the same exact thing, like same exact thing. She's I shouldn't laugh, but the truth is she's sitting in the dark. She has no heat. She's totally stressed beyond belief. And she dives into the sugar. Like, I don't know what she had. I don't even remember. She told me later. She had some cookies or some chocolate or something, right? And she was feeling awful. Like, she was feeling like a failure. And I just said to her, I said, sometimes you have to give yourself a break. You've heard me say this year. We've give yourself grace, right? Forgive and forget, start over. And sometimes you have to realize that it's just timing. Timing is a thing. And so, and timing's never going to be perfect. Okay. There is never a perfect time. So you have to work with what you have. But that is one of the things that I actually just wrote down, because I thought, you know what, I just want to go through this real quick, because Every time you start over, all right, let's say that you've started over on something 3 times or 5 times, whatever, doesn't matter, right? Every time you start over, think about this. You are starting over from a new place. You know more, you have a track record, you have knowledge that you didn't have before. I mean, you're starting over from an elevated platform than where you were before. And if you think about things that way, you realize that it's not eh, it's not like you've fallen off your pedestal. Instead, you're in a better place than you've ever been because you're starting over and you know stuff you didn't know before. For instance, let's just use my client because she's a perfect example. So when she's doing the Sugar Freedom program with me. So she came into it and she chose to do the 30 days, which is, it's a lot, right? So she comes into it first week. She didn't even really think about where all the sugar was in her world, right? She just hadn't even thought about it. So she's learning about it. Then the next week, she's learning about ways to change habits, ways to not just to, white knuckle your way through, but to change the habit, right? So she's got 2 weeks behind her and she's doing great. And then this happens, right? So, life happens. Actually, actually like crazy happens. Well, next week we're going to start over, right? Because we're going to just start back from where we were. And she's going to know so much more than she already knew, right? She's going to already have all the basics down. She's going to know what to expect and where the pitfalls are. She's just got this like tons of knowledge under her belt in just 2 short weeks. Okay. So think about that. Think about maybe if it's a fitness program, right? You decided that you were going to, get in shape, lose weight, blah, 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 whatever it was, right? So you start and you're maybe 3 or 4 weeks in. You've been consistent. You've been doing the exercise plan that you have. You've been scheduling, you've been following through, you've been doing everything you said you were going to do. And then something happens, whatever. You get a cold, you travel, someone comes to visit, whatever, something throws you off. Something slows you down and you feel like you're going to have to start over again. You are so much further ahead than you were when you first started. Like you're miles ahead. Before you started the first time, you weren't planning, you weren't scheduling, you didn't know what you wanted to do, like all those things, right? And you've already done them once. So you're starting from an elevated state. So be grateful about that, right? Think about it. Like it's worth looking back and going, okay, when I first started XYZ, whatever it is, I didn't know all the things I know. Like here's an example, has nothing to do with fitness. Here's an example in my world, software. There's a software program that I use and probably started using it 3 years ago. 3 years ago, that software program made me cry. Like, honest to goodness, I would be trying to do it. I'd be going through it. I'd just be like pulling my hair out. And I would hit that point where I'd be like, I can't do this. I can't do this. And I'm like, okay, Kelly, this is kind of silly. In fact, actually, is this two podcasts in a row I've talked about crying? I usually don't. Like I'm crying is not something I normally do, but that software used to put tears in my eyes. And I would quit. I would walk away. And then I'd come back a week later. I'd be like, by gosh, I need to use this stuff. I got to figure it out. Well, what I started realizing is that every time I came back to it, it was easier, right? I had the basics down. I knew what I was doing. So I had the basics down. Now it was just a matter of fine tuning and, well, getting a little bit smarter. So every time we start over, we're going to be better off than we were before. So think about that. I mean, like really appreciate it. Another thing is look at what threw you off. Okay. What threw you off? What was the wrench? Like, right? What was I don't know, the wrench in the wheel, whatever the saying is. What is it that stopped you? And when you know that, you'll be able to either avoid or recognize when it's happening again. Maybe it was just a vacation, right? Maybe it was a new job, house guests, a pandemic, a freeze, whatever, like what threw you off? Like really look at that and then just be aware of it. Because if you're aware of it, when you go back into this again, it won't, well, let me rephrase that. It might happen again, but with awareness comes the ability to make changes. Okay. Um, Another piece to know is that there is never a perfect time. Like there isn't. We're busy people. We're busy women, right? So much going on in life. And so there's never going to be a perfect time to start something. Maybe you start something now and you know darn good and well that in 3 weeks you're going to be traveling or something's going to come up, whatever. Just know that there's not a perfect time, but you just work with what you have. And if it means that you're down a week or you miss a week or you're going to have to start over, just remember, right? You're always starting over from an elevated space. And then another one is dial down your commitment a little bit. Okay. No, no one believes that I ever say this, but if you think about it, here's another client, and she's probably listening, and I'm just going to say, I love you, but I've got to use this example. So she's further north than I am in Texas. And I get a text from her. I don't know. Let's call it Sunday, right before this storm hit. Call it Sunday. So she's already in the middle of this mess. She can't drive because, we're Texans. We can't drive in ice. She can't go to the gym. The gyms are all shut down. There's no power. I mean, everything's at a standstill. It's just come to a screeching halt. She texts me and she's like, what do I do? I don't know what I can do because I can't go out for a walk. It's too dangerous. It's too slippery outside. I can't go run for the same reason. I can't get to the gym. What do I need to do? Like, she's in a panic. I'm like, well, I started to text her back, but by then I'd lost cell coverage. So I had to wait a day or two, I think. And when I texted her back, I was just like, I think you might have to just dial it back for a week. Okay. Sometimes we just have to be willing to dial down the commitment if you have to. Okay. Like sometimes, well, let me say this. I like to tell people to like plan for perfection, like plan it all, put it all out there, like my 10-week plan. Man, like that plan is full out, right? Full out. And then shoot for 80 to 90%. It seems like what I'm saying is that I'm not 100% committed. But what I'm really saying is that if I don't know, there's not a lot of food on that, not a lot of calorie counting on that thing, but there is some. So there's some calorie things that I'm watching. So, let's say I overgo on one day with the pasta, because of course I'm a pasta hound. Um, so, so I'm not perfect, right? But I'm still hitting a darn good 90% of it. So just be willing to think about the fact that, you might not hit perfection, but you know what? If you're hitting 80 or 90%, you're doing a good job. And then another thing is look back, and find out what's helped you in the past, what's helped you win in the past, like what's helped you stay consistent with what you want to do. And was it a coach? Was it an accountability buddy? Was it that the fact that you were, scheduling like I always tell you to do? Were you listening to a podcast that always keeps you on track, or maybe reading books or a blog? What helped you stay the course in the past? Because we need to know not just what held us back, but what moved us forward. What moved the needle forward, right? And when you know that, then what you can do is bring more of that in, right? Bring more of that in. Think about how you can make it more of a habit. And usually the way to make it more of a habit that you want is to bring in all those things that are going to make it easy to stick. Okay. Tracking your actions. If you just write down what your daily actions are going to be, and then you mark them off as you do them, keep it where you can see it. Like most of us are relatively visual. That's going to be one of the things that's going to just like put you over the edge quick. Another thing is that maybe you need to start a little smaller, right? What if What if my client that had texted me, what if for her, she really needed to start smaller and she didn't, like, right? She's really on track for this 30 days of no sugar. She's kicking ass and taking names, quite frankly, even though she feels like she isn't this week. But maybe she needed to start smaller, or maybe someone needs to start smaller. One of the funny things, not funny, one of the interesting things that I didn't realize until I did a survey is that most of the people who didn't join the program this last go round said that 30 days was just too damn long. Like, they'd do it for 21 days, they'd do it for 2 weeks, but they weren't going to do 30 days. I was like, okay, makes sense. Let's let's adjust accordingly. But thinking about that, you realize that if you start smaller, if you need to, then it's going to be easier to be more consistent. Like for me, I'm a huge, huge fan of doing your fitness in 4-week increments, right? Like you start with a slower week, and then you build up to a little bit harder week, and then you build it up to a harder week, and then you slow down to a rest week, and then you build it up, build it up, build it up, and then slow down to a rest week. And what you're doing when you do that is you're starting small. Actually, if you think about it, you're starting a little bit easier so you can figure out what's going to work for you and what isn't. And then, just like pay attention to what worked for you and what didn't. Okay. And if you find yourself in a place where you feel like you're always starting over, then just go back and think about this, right? Like, one, if you are starting over a lot, you're never starting over from the place you were before. Okay. You're always better off. You're always better equipped than you were the time before. You know more. You just know more. Whatever it is, you know more than you knew before. And then look at what threw you off in the past. Okay. And just kind of like what threw you off, and then plan for it if you need to. If you find that traveling, like for me, traveling, pretty much I never, like, I just do not plan to do my usual workout ever when I'm traveling, because that would be silly for me, because it just wouldn't work. So I dial it way back, right? Like, I just do the things that are most important for me, and that's that. And then the next week I pick it back up. So look at what throws you off. For me, like, no electricity and 40 degrees in the house slowed me down. Quite frankly, there was no way I was going to go sit and go and um, do my weights. I just wasn't going to. And I gave myself grace too, right? So look back at what throws you off, then look and see what helped you move forward. Like, what was it that really helped you win? Okay. Um, and then a couple of other things are that you want to remember there's no perfect time. Like, there's no perfect time to start. Just do your best. Okay. If you need to dial down the commitment, dial down the commitment. It's okay. Right? This is not like, we're not trying to do something in the short term here. We're here for the long game, right? I mean, this is it. This is life. This is health. This is your health for the long game. So if you're willing to go as hard as you can, whenever you can, because your outcome is always going to be that you want to be as healthy as you possibly can, then all of these things matter, right? And it's not like every day you have to be perfect. And then remember, if you can make it a habit, figure it out. Figure out how to make it. I've got a lot of episodes on habits, guys. So there will be, we can link to them in the show notes. But just like, think about that. And then give yourself a little break, okay? Give yourself a break. If you're not doing exactly what you're saying you're going to do, or if you feel like you're always starting over, do all these things. Make it a little easier. Be easy on yourself. And then, you know what? One day you're going to realize that you really are, if you're starting over, you really are starting from a place that you never were in the past, right? You're so far ahead of where you were. And it's so very, very empowering. Okay. And to all those people who are out there who feel like, how many times am I going to have to start over to get this right? I can just tell you it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how many times you start over. What it matters is you just keep going. Thank you so very much for being here. And by the way, like if you want to slow down on the sugar or the wine, then you might want to join us. We've got another sugar reset coming up. And another thing that I'm doing that's new, brand new, is that we're going to be working on fitness consistency. Because in the end, what we're talking about right now really is consistency, even if it means that we miss a week. As long as we start back over quicker than we did before, we start over in a week instead of a month, 6 months, or a year, then you're way more consistent than you were, right? So those are a couple of things that I have coming up. You can go over to fitisfreedom.com. Just check out the show notes. We'll have them linked in there. And thank you so very much for being here. Thank you again. And I will talk to y'all next week. See you. Bye-bye.